Ladies and gentlemen, faithful listeners, boys, girls, welcome back to another episode of the Keystone Chronicles podcast. Guys, this week we are joined by Taylor Fliesher with a great conversation from two Pennsylvania boys just kicking it, man. We go over some stuff about how he got addicted to the game of archery hunting, whether or not he's a trophy hunter, specific deer that he likes to hunt, hunting mobily, couple heartbreak stories, and blood tracking. You're going to see a common thing, I think, moving forward before the season starts, where I do a lot of talking about tracking deer, and I think that it's a really an art, and there's a lot to be learned and said from it. And the biggest thing that I have found is learning from others' mistakes, and I have myself has made plenty of mistakes tracking deer. And so have many other people. So I like to bring that up and kind of go over that. And I just want to point out, guys, we need to make ethical shots as hunters. And if you can't do that, I'm sorry, but you need to stay out of the woods. So if you're confident at your 40, 50, 60 yards, whatever you're shooting at all the time, and you're putting in all the time, and you know that you're going to make an ethical shot at that, by all means, have at her. When you're in the cut or you're in the timber and you or in a little bit of a thicket, I want you just to mind that. Or if you're shooting at that twilight type hour, that you can't really see everything that's out in front of you, whether you think it or not. So guys, always just run that through your head, and we just want to be ethical. I just wanted to push that out there real quick. Guys, I want to thank everybody that's been reaching out. I've been super busy as of late, and my wife is working later hours at night, so it's been very tough and difficult to be able to sit down and try to go over everything with the podcast. So probably for right now, I am going to do 2 episodes a month until we can kind of get our schedules figured out together, and my work kind of dies down. I'm working a lot of extra hours. So thank you all for being patient. I have 2 really good episodes coming up for you this month, and then I have a couple things here on the back burner going into the season I think will be really good. And if you guys have any questions, need help with anything, feel free to reach out to me. I will help you in any way I can. If you guys hear anybody on the show that you'd like to reach out to or you can't contact, please reach out to me, and I can also help out with that. So here we go with Taylor Fliesher. This was a great conversation. I really enjoyed his time, and I think you guys will too. Thank you. God bless. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Keystone Chronicles podcast. Guys, we were just talking before we come on, and we're ready to go for this one. We're ready to talk whitetails. I told him it's been a while, and I need to get that whitetail talk out of my system. So, ladies and gentlemen, Taylor Fliesher, here we go, man. This is going to be a good conversation. I think that me and you can really go down a rabbit hole for a couple things here, man. So, before we get started, just let everybody know who you are and kind of what you're all about.
Yeah, I'm Taylor Fleischer, born and raised in Pennsylvania. Raised here, went to school here, and I hunt here. I mean, that's pretty much the bulk of my outdoor life has been in Pennsylvania. Started rifle hunting like most young men at 10 to 12, and got into archery at 13 or 14, and that kind of took over. So a bulk of my hunting is archery. We always try to fill some tags with a rifle after season if we need to get some meat for family and friends. But I'm an archery guy. That's my preference. Even the late season archery has its own unique challenge, which I thoroughly enjoy.
So, we'll get right into it. And you said you started archery hunting like right around the time you were 13, 14 or so. And I just kind of want you to talk about what happened there, right? Because you were probably raised in a family where even if they were archery hunters or whatnot, you were raised in that time where the rifle hunting was probably more prominent, more popular than archery. Because modern day archery is like just exploded. And it makes sense because you and I know why.
Yeah.
It's so much more. I want to say more exciting. It's just every aspect of it. You see deer chasing in the rut, or you just the amount of time you have to put in, and how much better it feels when you kill, because you probably did put more time in and you scouted more and you tried to hone your woodsmanship, and there's just so much that goes into it. Or the off time shooting your bow as opposed to shooting your rifle in 1 or 2 days. Loaded question, but how did that happen, right? So kind of walk me down that path of here's how I got addicted to archery, and this is the bug that bit me.
Yeah, so at 13, my father was not an archery hunter. He hunted when he was younger, but growing up, he had an old golden eagle that was in our basement for a long time that really never left the basement. So I kind of started archery hunting, not necessarily on the lead of my father, but a friend of mine's father who was a diehard archery man, and he hunted everywhere with a bow, and that's pretty much all he hunted with. And he kind of got me hooked onto it, and I kind of grabbed it and didn't let go. I mean, we would shoot together. Friends of mine would shoot together. We'd have to have our parents, drive us to meet up and shoot. And once I started hunting, it was I got into archery at 13, but I probably didn't start feeling comfortable enough to hunt until maybe 14. So
Mm.
um, we went to their cabin up in northern Pennsylvania, and we archery hunted there. And I shot my first buck with a bow there, and I learned a POW from that hunting experience, and that kind of it hooked me. I mean, I there was no other no I had never experienced that intimate of a relationship with, or that intimate of an experience, I should say, with a deer,
Mhm.
than that first archery buck. I had killed buck with a rifle before that, but there is such an intimate relationship between you and that deer in the archery woods that you know it's unmatched. I mean, you can't replicate it with a rifle. You're rarely that close, and you rarely have that type of connection.
Yeah, that's a great answer, brother. I agree 100% with you, and it's so funny that before you even got into that story, that I understood or just kind of assumed that maybe your background growing up wasn't so much that archery, and then um, you know you were kind of bred into it from somebody else or whatever. And my story's not quite different. My dad was an archery hunter a little bit before I kind of got into it, but it's so funny that you said that the golden eagle, because that's what I had, was one of them golden eagles sitting in the basement, and Dad set me up with it, and I remember it's real funny. The release on the side, the rest was just like a piece of uh, rubber, if you will, like tough rubber, and we got those square sticky pads that you peel one side off and you can peel the other side off. And I remember had like four of them out there sticking out of the side, and I probably was only shooting 20 pounds or whatever. But I remember my dad and my dad's friends and my uncle and stuff taking us to 3D tournaments, and I remember arrows boom, 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 flying all over the place,
Yeah.
hitting things, and growing up like that, and it's really wonderful, man. And I remember the first deer I shot with a bow, and I'll never forget it. Not that I will forget the first deer I shot with a rifle, but you're right. I mean, it's so hard to compare that kind of intimate just connection with killing something, and then us hunters always get that bad rap of just like killing things, right? But where it's not really what's going on, and it's hard to explain to people that aren't in the crowd or really understand. But that connection with a bow, like you said, it seems to be a lot more. It feels like you worked a little bit harder, maybe, or put more skin into that game, and then when it happens, you feel like um, you gave the deer more of a chance, if you will, or the animal, whatever you may be hunting. And it's kind of like, hey, just it's weird. Like I know sometimes I'll touch my animals and I'll just be like, thank you, and that connection of things and all that. But um, you've been archery hunting for a good while now, and I know that you've shot some really nice bucks. And would you consider yourself more of a larger antler, larger deer, more mature deer hunter now, Uh, or are you kind of like a opportunistic hunter? Do you, hey, I only have so much time to get out there. I want to get out there. I want to get this done. I know that there's some pretty decent deer in here, and if, God help me, if that deer comes out and it gives me that good shot, I'm gonna knock him down.
Yeah, I wouldn't classify myself as a trophy hunter. I will say this though. Um, I do find great satisfaction in setting your sights on one specific deer
Mm,
and doing everything in your power to kill that deer. Um, because there's a huge amount of satisfaction with a 6 month body of work going into killing one specific animal and finally sealing the deal than there is a buck you've never seen before.
mm,
So I I feel like I may be transitioning to that one specific buck only. It's kind of an all or nothing deal, but I'm still one of those guys that if it's close to Pope, I'm gonna have a difficult time passing that deer. That being said, every season's different. Every buck inventory season is different. So depending on what I've got available to me, dictates how strict I am with my decision making process as far as which buck I'm going to shoot. So um, no, I'm a firm believer of you do not pass your personal best buck. So if your best buck is a 100-inch 8 point, do not pass a 110-inch 8 point because you might get a 140. I'm a firm believer that as much as we preach practicing and scouting and shooting your bow a lot and running your tree stand up and down a tree before the season and practice, practice, practice. But you also have to practice killing. You have to practice killing deer because it's like training camp for football. You've got all those months to get ready, but you really don't know how it's going to work out until you're in the game. So you have to figure out how you react when you're under pressure. And I'm a firm believer of practice killing. I mean, kill does. Even if you're not a meat guy, kill does. Somebody will take them. This Hunter Sharing the Harvest program is an excellent program in this state, and I'm a firm believer of getting doe tags and killing those doe because it's just a notch in your belt because it's better to practice on a doe than the buck of a lifetime.
mm. Yeah, I think that you make a valid point, and I want to say that my dad has said for years and years and years, and he is right. This is not a spectator sport. Okay, if you want to go watch deer and look at deer, go to a penned-in farm and go watch and look at deer. You got
That's
to
right.
shoot them with something, and I say something because I know guys that shoot them with a camera, right? But they're out
Right.
there and they're not just spectating; they're being part of it, and I do preach all the time that even if I'm not going to shoot this doe group or this single doe or whatever that come up, I will pull the bow back and I'll get in position to kill her. And it's just
Yes.
that those reps, and just even getting that practice of being able to get your bow back with multiple deer around you and not get busted, or just kind of getting that sweet spot of, okay, the deer's over here, I'm going to get my bow back when they walk behind that bush, and then 3 steps later, I'll already be, where I need to be to make the shot, right? And
Right.
that's it's just muscle memory, it's practice, whatever you want to call it, but it also helps your mindset. And like you said, there's multiple different things that I've been told from people that I do try to practice now, and that's like the cold shot. If I get home from work or whatever, and um, I decide I'm going to go in the woods and hunt that night, I will shoot an arrow into my block, even if I'm 10 yards away. It doesn't matter. One arrow, pling, and it's just like it just. I compared it to like a pitcher in baseball. You put the or a quarterback. You put the sleeve on and keep your arm warm, right? And you're always ready to go. And with the mental state of things, I think that really helps. And like you said, also you went 3 years in a buck drought, and the buck of a lifetime just come up and you botched a shot, and maybe all them does that you passed the last couple years or whatever are kind of coming back to haunt you because hey, you could have killed them. But I do understand. Some guys don't want to kill what they don't eat. I don't kill things that I don't really eat. Um, we did talk about the crow and stuff like I don't eat the crow, but um, I don't really kill things I don't eat. But yes, there is a place for doe to be shot. We need to keep the population correct. I do my share of doe killing. I think that they taste wonderful, so I have no problem killing them. But for the other reason, I think that that's how I can stay, relevant and stay in that mode, that killing mode, and that mindset of being able to do it all the time. So that's a great it's a great thing to talk about right there, and it's 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 something that I really wish everybody would practice because I've even brought it up a couple times. Like guys see all the stuff on television, and that can really ruin stuff because oh well, and not to use any names, but like juries, they shoot giant deer. And they're very well known, and they're on lots of television series, and God bless them because them guys, they put in all their work. They're farmers, you know what I mean? They it's what they do. It's what they're good at. But the thing is, then a lot of people see that and they're like, oh, well, I got to kill a 170-inch deer. And like, they're out there, yeah, but it's not just that easy. I think that you should go shoot that 100-inch buck, shoot that 110-inch deer, whatever. Or maybe not even antlers. Maybe let's just talk body size, right? The maturity of the animal, and go and try to kill a mature whitetail because when you can start doing that, I don't care how big the antlers are. Like, that 6-year-old deer that you just fooled, he's fooled a lot of people in his life, and you should feel very good whether he's 110 or 160 inches. So, I kind of like the way that they look at things up north, and I don't know if you're real familiar with some northern guys, but they could give two shits what antlers are on a deer's head. They want to know right after it's dead how much does that deer weigh instantly. That's like the first thing that that's what they're worried about, and they want to know how much mature the animal is, which is pretty cool. It's a little change of pace, and I like that. But I mean, there are some deer out in the Midwest, man, that are some soybean eating mothers, and they're freaking huge. They're really big.
Yes.
I have shot some very, very, very large bodied deer in Ohio, so they're out there.
Yeah.
So, um,
Well, and the other thing that's also important with that practice killing thing is practice after the shot. I mean, there's not enough guys that practice tracking, and
mm,
practice how you're gonna get that deer out of the woods. Practice gutting deer. Practice processing deer. That's all part of it. I mean,
yeah,
if you have to quarter out that deer, hopefully you have practiced quartering out a deer
hmm
because that's not just if unless you have cell service and you can YouTube how to quarter a deer, um, it's gonna be tough for you. So all that stuff, I am a huge advocate of proper tracking. I see so many guys that botch the recovery of a deer because a they went too fast,
mm,
or I mean they pursued the animal too quickly, or two they're just looking for blood, not hoof tracks or hair. There's a proper way to track, and it's slow and steady. They don't mark where they last saw the deer. I mean, all that after the shot stuff is every bit as important, if not more so important, than the shot itself. Because you can make a perfect shot or a marginal shot, but if it's not exactly the pump house station where it dies 50 yards and you watch the white belly roll, you've got a little bit of work because you got to figure out where he is. And that's what a lot of guys struggle with is the recovery.
mm.
And it doesn't have to be that way.
Well, so that's a great conversation too, and basically, how is it that you know that, right? How is it that you know what you should probably do and what you probably shouldn't do? And my guess is you've probably been part of either your own tracking or some friends or family's tracking to where you muffed it, right? You messed up. You guys went in,
Absolutely.
hey, I made the shot, man. I made the shot. The deer ran. I heard it fall. And everybody gets all giggity and excited and the headlamps come on and you start running through the woods like a hootenanny, and next thing you know you hear that dreaded noise. you know Deer stands up, and God forbid you hit him in the gut because you probably never find that deer, right? If he was piled up and he's blood clotted now, good luck, right? Especially if he was bedded on the side
Yeah.
of a CRP field, which or a clear cut or something, which they love to do. They're creatures of edge. They're going to go to where they
Right.
feel safe. I mean, I've been there too, man. And that is, you make a great point. I wish that, man, that is something that's not talked about enough. That is probably for me, that's one of my biggest pet peeves when it comes to hunting, because I see too many guys that are like, I don't wound deer. And I'm like, dude, don't even say that out loud. Like, I have a wooden table right here and I'm knocking
Right.
on it for you because I've been there, I've done it. And yeah, was it my fault? Probably. I mean, other than one time that I blame a broadhead company for the broadheads I received, that they broke. The ferrule broke. It should not break there. The arrow should break before that. You know, just some things that happened in that line. That wasn't my fault. The two other ones, yeah, I take full responsibility for them. The limb I didn't see, and the other one I made a bad shot. And it
Yep.
happens. These were giant deer I hit. I don't know. I couldn't tell you if I
Yep.
just didn't have the practice. I don't know if I tell you I wasn't disciplined. Whatever happened, it happened, right? So there's guys out there that, well, I'm better than you. Sure, good for you. I'm happy for you. I hope it never happens to you. But at the same time, let me tell you, I'll be here for you to cry on whenever it happens, because it's probably going to. And there's that other conversation of being able to get back on the horse and get back in the game, right? You wound a deer. I know a lot of guys are like, I'm done. I'm gonna hang it up for the season. Okay, if that's the way you feel, no problem. But if you're ready to get back in the saddle, then you need to climb in the saddle and learn from your lesson, and get back out there and get one on the ground as soon as you can verify that, hey, maybe I'm not going to find this deer, right? And
That's right.
the other side of tracking it, I have been a part of the same thing that you've been a part of too many times. And I have so many friends that listen to the show, and I know that they're thinking, oh man, I've been on these adventures with you, with my deer, with their deer, right? And now, like, man, somebody says I hit a deer, my first tell, I tell them I just hang out. Don't even get out of your tree stand
Yep.
yet. I tell them, just don't even, I made a good shot. I don't care. Just wait an hour. Just enjoy being there. Well, it's getting dark. I don't care. Just hang out. I'm on the way. I will come help you. Do not get down. Just wait. Just wait. If you need to get down, just give it an hour. Give it an hour. I'll come down. We can just take a look at the spot you shot. If you're kind of unsure, we'll look right there. If we don't like it, we're going to back out. We're going to come back in the morning. It's just not worth, going in at night and doing that. And I know guys like, well, it might rain. Well, it might. Yeah, yeah, it might, and sometimes there are circumstances where I have pushed, and it panned out, right? Well, I know the rain's coming, and there's times where you have to make that call, but if that's not the nature of the beast, then when we don't need to go that route. I also want to say that I have a friend coming on the podcast very soon. He has a blood tracking dog. I've seen these dogs in action. This is something that is on the table for us as Pennsylvania guys now, and I personally believe it's great. I'm a big advocate of being able to track a deer with a dog, just because I don't want to see them get ruined or lose the meat or go to waste, right? So to being able to use the dogs, I think is a wonderful thing. I know some people aren't on board with it, but I want to say that if you're going to do that, there are rules that you have to do. You can only walk that blood trail for so long, and you need to skedaddle. You don't want to be in there tracking that up and all that other stuff. The other thing I want to say is, if you do lose blood, grid searching is probably the best way to go about it. I've found deer plenty of times that way. A lot of people know that the deer will go to water. I have found deer go to water. Um, if you're in something that's kind of thick and you're walking around and you see that big multiflora rose thicket that nothing would ever want to go in your life, your deer's probably laying in there, right? They're gonna go somewhere where they feel safe, and I've found deer like that. Um, but it is unfortunate, like you said, the guys will get out ahead of themselves. So, mark a blood trail, leave a couple spots where you can go back, and because how many times have you seen a deer do this and then all of a sudden it goes like this? And you're like, where did
Mm-hmm.
the blood go? Right? I've seen that too many times, and what we like to do is if you're the guy out front and you kind of have an eye, it's like you get an eye for the blood. You're like, oh, this guy has like a hot eye or the hot hand, if you want to call it, right? And that guy's in front, and then one or two guys in the rear just kind of giving him a little extra light on the sides, but also they're kind of belly searching. They're kind of just but they're not going to muff up the blood trail, right? They're going to keep their distance and stay back. And then if he has to stop and double back, then we can make a turn and maybe go another way and look and see if the deer moved another way. But like you said, look for them hoof prints, right? That's another big thing guys don't look for. You see this spot, oh, look at this spot's kicked up real weird. Well, the deer might have jumped or turned, right? Um, there's a lot. There's a lot that goes into tracking deer, and if you can take somebody with you that's experienced and will teach you how to track a wounded deer, you should most definitely reach out to them and ask them for advice, because I'm sure that they'll probably receive you with arms wide open.
That's right. Yeah, nobody wants to lose a deer, and nobody wants to hear about somebody losing a deer. I mean, it's a group effort, but you're right. I mean, in my opinion, the biggest mistake when you're tracking with a party is too many guys.
Mm.
I mean, guys walking over the trail. When we track deer, it's two guys.
Mm-hmm.
You have a lead man, and then you have a back man, and you pretty much leapfrog, and you mark blood as you go. We don't take flagging tape or anything, but we almost always, when we've all got toilet paper in our
Yep.
bag, so we'll rip off a little square and you mark last blood,
Mm.
and that way you know if you get spun around or get on the wrong trail, if you're following a healthy deer's hoof prints, you can circle back and get back on blood. But yeah, you don't want to walk on the trail either. I mean, yeah, that's an art in and of itself. I mean, there's a reason there was Indian trackers. There's a reason that was a job,
Right.
because it was a specialized skill.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's really important with what we do. And the other thing is reading the arrow. Know what kind of blood you're
Mm.
looking at. Smell it. Does it smell sour? I mean, that
Right.
determines your next step. So
Yeah.
I wish more people, and the only way to practice that stuff is to practice killing.
Mm.
That's it.
I like that. I also want to add in that when it comes to killing deer like this, you know, you got to take an ethical shot, right? Because I know that that's probably something that chaps your ass too. But I know guys that
Yeah.
they'll tell me, "Oh, well, I'll shoot a deer 50 yards," and hey, I'm telling you, buddy, hey, hats off, because
Yeah.
I won't. I just that to me, yeah, can I shoot out here in my yard 50 yards? I'll take you back out to 70 and shoot, right? But when it gets in the woods, I've wounded too many deer. I need to be as close as I can, not because that's where my confidence is, because that's just I know what can happen in 50 plus yards, right? That limb that I can't see, that little thing sticking off the tree that big, what it can do to the arrow, hit that deer, wound it. And I'm not saying don't shoot 50 yards. If that's what you're definitely comfortable with, do it. But don't come whining to me if you wounded a deer shooting at it 50 yards. You know what I'm saying? So,
That's right. It's all personal comfort, and if I'm being honest, if you can shoot 50 yards, you're probably in the wrong spot because you shouldn't be able to shoot 50 yards if you're in a big buck's backyard.
I like that. I like that. Yep. Yeah, I hunt as much as I can. I like to hunt like the edges of clear cuts and thickets, and I always find the bucks kind of scurrying the downwind or the thermal pull side of doe bedding, during the rut. Or if I can set up off a scrape kind of downwind of it, but also in front
Yep.
of where, I feel like I could cut a buck off on a thicket. And you're right. The spots I hunt, I don't think you could shoot over 35 yards. I just don't. It would be too hard. Plus, you would probably get spotted because I only hunt like 15 to 16 to 17 feet off the ground for the most part. I like to use two climbing sticks with two aiders, and I can get up and down the tree quick. Whether I'm
Yeah.
in a saddle or the tree stand, doesn't matter. Pick your poison, whatever's more comfortable for the day. But I know a lot of guys they like to go really high. One of my buddies. I was walking through the woods and I heard this whistle and I was looking for him. I'm like, what the? And I looked up a tree and I'm like, what the hell are you doing up there? No, he was in a climber, so I get it. I mean, you can get up in some climbers. I don't say some climbers, most
Yeah.
climbers, but um, he was probably like 30 plus feet in the air. I'm like, what the hell are you doing? He's like, oh, I never get busted. I
Yeah.
said, yeah, but no, you got a 40-yard shot just to shoot the ground, you crazy mother.
That's right. I mean, yeah, I know guys that do the same thing. I'm like, man, you got 20 yards straight
I'm
down.
telling you,
I
man.
you got a 50-yard shot when I got a
I'm
20.
telling
So
you, they get lightheaded up there. They got to take oxygen up with them. It's crazy. It's crazy to me.
yeah, as far as tree stand height, I'm rarely above. I'm rarely above 17 feet. I'm usually somewhere between 12 and 17.
Yeah.
I feel like that's unless you've got to be higher due to the hill above you
Hmm.
or
Right.
something. I'm not afraid to go higher. It's just you get much higher than that. I mean, your close shots are tough. I mean, 45 down to a deer at when you're 20 to 25 feet in the air. It's a pretty narrow
Yeah.
window. So yeah, the lower you are, the more of that side of the deer you see.
Now, while we're on that topic, we can kind of segue into that. Are you someone that would consider themselves to be like a mobile hunter? Are you more of like I'm going to place a couple tree stands strategically in these spots, and then I'm going to check thermals, wind, weather, whatever have you, time of year, maybe history with certain deer in certain spots, or how do you kind of go about getting out there? Do you hunt on the ground a lot? What's your game?
Yeah, so most of my stand setups are permanent. That said, I do have multiple mobile setups that I can throw my back and adjust if need be. But I have some ladder stands set up. The buck I shot this past year was out of a ladder stand because it was a traditionally good spot. Um, we modify those stands. Obviously, we check straps every year and put our lifelines back up. But certain time, if a tree falls down or if we see them using a different path, we can adjust. But we have general areas that are historically good, which we keep stands there because you don't always have time, especially after work or whatever, to climb up. It's just easier to grab your bow and your backpack, and you can be strapped in 30 minutes. So
Hmm.
instead of trying to climb a tree every time, it's nice to have some permanent units. But that said, if we know the buck are running lower than normal, we'll grab our mobile systems and go lower. We'll go where they are if we need to. But for the most part, we have predominantly permanent stands that are, like I said, in traditionally good areas.
Yeah. I would be right in the same boat as you as far as um, in my on my family land. Yeah, I have certain spots where ladder stands and such that get checked every year. Check the area. What I have found is I will try to access them in different manners because maybe my dad was hunting that walking in this way, and maybe the deer probably maybe knew that, right? Because they're there, the sign's there, but they develop a keen um, instinct for how we're moving about the property. So I'm gonna switch it up and circle in here and get in, and I have found that to work. Some other things, for the mobile stuff is I I've been hard pressed in my whole hunting adventure, which I've been hunting for a very long time, that I have never found something quite as good as a first sit. Um, I it just I know there's lots of guys out there that'll agree with me too. It's just something about the first sit that it's like you do. It's like you ambush them. It's like they have no clue. They have no idea. And I've just got on so many deer that way. Perfect example is just 2 years ago. My brother and I were hunting in the state of Indiana. We probably should have had one. Um, we came into Ohio on a Wednesday night. It was dark. We went into game lands right before dark. It started to get dark as we were in there. We hung some sets separate from each other, and I thought I was in a great spot. I could see where the acorns were rolling down this hill and kind of were piling up on this log, and I could hear them hitting the ground in the area, but it was kind of flat on top of there. So I just positioned myself to where the thermals would be pulling downhill, but I was kind of in like it seemed like a thicket. And I feel like I'm only 15 feet off the ground. I'll just set up on this hillside just enough to where I'll catch the thermals pulling down. I think that the deer are walking across this top on this flat. And I was right. I was dead on. I turned my head an hour after being in a tree stand in the morning, and there was a monster buck there. And he was working his way to me now. He did get my ground scent from where I walked in because I walked right down to the tree stand, but kind of tried to circle back around it. But he walked in on the side that I circled in on, and he just started acting funny. When you just know they know something's up. I knew my thermals were pulling downhill. The sun hadn't come up yet or anything like that, and it was going to take a while for the sun to come around and kick my thermals up. Wind was blowing to my left side. The deer was backing behind me. I'm talking like my 8, 9 o'clock, and got turned around. I got the bow back on him, and it was probably about a 35 to 37 yard shot from what I was guesstimating. Didn't really have time to get nothing on him to really get a good reading, but there was a limb there. I didn't see it. Ended up missing a deer. I seen a little bit of blood out there, but I know what happened. I got one of his forearms is what I believe happened. Tracked him for a long time there, but like I said, we were talking about track, and I waited 4 hours and just a little bit of blood.
Yeah.
But it's just that was that first set, and it's really funny because I got kind of mad about it, myself. I'm like, I just doze it off, whatever. I still got 5 days to hunt, no big deal. So right around 1 o'clock or so, I went in, I pulled that tree stand, I went down this ridge line probably 250 yards from where I was originally hunting, and I found a humongous scrape. It's really funny. I tell people all the time, like if I see like a lone beech tree in the woods, and it's like just high enough I'll run to that thing. I'll run to that thing because I
Yeah.
know there's scrapes underneath that thing. At least in the areas that I hunt, it seems to be they love the beech trees, and makes sense. Them leaves are on almost year round. But
Yeah.
sure as shit, big car hood scrape right below it. Set myself up, and what I did was I took some paracord down, and it was thick in there, so I pulled a shooting lane back. I just threw my paracord around some of these small beech trees and pulled them back so that I could get a shooting lane. And public land, so I can't cut nothing or anything, you know what I mean? So I get up in the tree stand, and sure as shit, 3 days later, here comes this big buck, and I think it was the same deer, but if it wasn't, then it was just another really nice big 10 point. And he come in, and sure as shit, he got in front of me. And what did he do as soon as he got in front of me? He turned around and looked straight away from me, and
Hmm.
he was getting my ground scent against what was going on because he was right in that shooting lane. And yeah, I had that shot, right? And we talk about ethics shots, but he's ass facing me, looking back towards me, through me. Not at me, through me.
Yeah.
He didn't know I was there, but something's not right. And I just didn't take the shot. 20 yards, 20, 25 yards, he's right there. But I'm not gonna wound that deer over me just saying I got to get an arrow in him. I gotta shoot because that deer might have turned and he might have gave me the shot I needed, but instead he just walked away. He just walked right out of my
Yeah.
life. And did it burn my, chat my ass? Yeah, it did. It did, but I live with it easier knowing I didn't wound it. I didn't wound a deer. I
That's
didn't
right.
take an unethical shot. And, the way I believe it, karma will reward me at some point, and I'll have a nice deer that size or bigger maybe, and he'll come in and give me the right shot. So I can at least one
Yeah.
can hope. So
Yeah, and that's how you have to do it. And if you feel like if you feel like you can't lay off that shot, you know, I hate to say it, but you probably shouldn't be out there because you can't make those
mm,
shots. And I've witnessed guys make some just awfully unethical shots, and every time it happens, it's almost like man, what are you doing out here? I mean, this is it's not just target practice here. We're not shooting 3D. I mean,
yeah,
you gotta make a clean kill, and yeah, it's really important to be efficient, ethical, and and that's really all that matters.
mm,
If I mean if you're not ethical, please just develop a habit that is.
yeah, yep, I agree, man. And moving forward into this conversation, we're getting really close, right? It's
Yeah,
almost Christmas morning, right? We
yeah,
all earned for it and love it, and it's always like you get the first 3 hours in a tree stand, and all of a sudden it starts to get hot, and you're like, oh no, it's hot out here, or the bugs start flying around or whatever because it's so warm still. But what are some things that you do, kind of going into the season? We all go out scouting for the most part. We all shoot our bows and whatnot, but what's kind of your process going into a season? Do you do anything like mentally where you're like, hey man, I really want this benchmark. This is a goal I'd set for myself this season. I'd like to play it through, like you said, maybe packing out a deer or I want to shoot three does this year, right? I feel like that's my obligation. That's what I need to do. What are some things you think about or look for going into an archery season here in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, I don't know that I necessarily set a goal other than maybe having, a specific buck that I'm
Mm,
after. Um, I would say every year I have one individual buck that has kind of occupied my thought. So that buck is always my goal, of course. That doesn't always come to fruition because he dies before I get a chance, or he just outthinks me. But that's having whatever target buck I have that year is always the goal. The goal is to not wound a deer. That's kind of my goal every year.
mm,
So my last year I missed a doe in the early season shooting out of a ground blind. I had never hunted out of a ground blind before. The situation that I was in, that was the only way to hunt the area. And what I failed to realize in hunting out of a ground blind is it is super dark in there and you can't see your pins unless you've got a light on your pins.
mm,
And and I sailed an arrow right over this doe's back, and I thought, you know, I don't do that. I, I don't do. I feel like I felt like I was better than that, and I clearly wasn't better than that. And up until that point, I had a heck of a streak going where I hadn't missed a deer in a long time, and when that happens, it's super humbling. So getting
mm,
back to the goal, my goal this year is to successfully kill buck or doe out of a ground blind because I've never done that before.
mm,
So I would like to do that this year. I've got a bunch of doe tags, and where that ground blind is a mecca of doe, which it's in a suburban area that they're begging people to get some doe out of there. So we're hoping that we can achieve that goal this year. But yeah, and the other goal that I have more recently, I have filmed myself in the past, but I've never got a great a great kill on film. So I would like to do that at some point. Whether or not that happens this year, I don't know. I tend to leave the camera and stuff back at the truck when it gets hot and heavy, and all I'm thinking about is
putting one.
spending every waking minute in the woods, and I don't have the extra 30 minutes at the truck to make
Hmm.
sure batteries are charged and stuff.
I get
So,
that.
um, yeah, so I never really have outlandish goals, but the overwhelming goal every year is to not wound a deer or to recover every deer that I shoot. Does it happen all the time? No, but it's been a long time for me, and I hate to even say that, knock on wood here, that I've lost a deer that I've hit. I've That doe, I missed her clean. I mean, it went straight over her back, watched it happen, and I'm sure it was a wrong pin scenario based on low light, but um, yeah, I other than the ground blind deer and trying to get one on film, no major goals.
Okay. Yeah, you keep bringing up hunting a specific deer. So let's just get into right. How do you go about that? Right? What is your process? I found this deer. This is the one. Here's how I found it, and here's how I'm gonna kill it.
Yeah, my process is I go through the same process every year. Step one is to find food. Once you find food, then you have to find bedding. And somewhere between food and bedding is always some scrapes and some rubs. So um, once I find bedding, then I try to find the buck beds, which there's always, a couple, but there's always that one king bed that you're trying to find, and it's not always easy to find, and sometimes you never
Mm,
find it. But once I find what I deem is a good buck bed, then I start after I kind of survey the area, then I back out of there and I put cameras on his front porch in his front yard, parked by his truck. I like to put cameras all around that guy's house to figure out how he's getting
mm,
there. So those are cameras specifically set for one deer. That's not trying to inventory bucks. That's not trying to figure out movement times. That's just trying to figure out what that specific buck is doing. Once I can do that, I just get, you know, you start wide and you start narrow it in more and more and more. And as the season gets closer, I transition pretty much all those cameras to cell cams because I don't really want to go back in close to him in August, September.
Mm-hmm.
So after their cell cams, then it's pretty much just monitoring. And his path in and out of that bed changes um, as the season progresses, obviously. But there's always a window that you don't get him on any of those cameras. The buck I killed last year, the second and third week of October, he was gone. I have no idea where he went, but he wasn't even remotely killable because he wasn't there. And after that third week, he came back and he was running a pretty steady path um, that made him killable. So after you get them, dialed in, their movements dialed in, then I tend to be a pretty passive hunter. I try not to get too aggressive until it's a last ditch effort. Um, what I deem passive is beyond 100 yards from the bed. Beyond 100 yards, I feel like I can, screw up a little bit. But once I get within that 100-yard bubble, in my mind, I have to be perfect. And if I'm not perfect, that's probably it. I don't own 1,000 acres, so if I blow a deer off of my property, chances are I'm not going to get another crack at him because he's going to be gone. Um, so yeah, so it's all about casting a wide net and narrowing it down to his path. There's no way of knowing whether or not he sticks to that all year, and that's why nothing's a guarantee. But you can you can really dial in on a deer with the use of cell cams and trail cams. I mean, I know some guys argue that whether that is ethical or not, but I'm telling you, cameras are my eyes. I mean, I have to go to work. I wish I could sit by that tree all day long and watch when he passes, but I can't. So it's kind of a new school approach, but it's an old school tactic of patterning the deer.
Right.
So that's it. I mean, narrow it down to a couple main trails and try to find the second bed too, because there's always a second bed. There's a third, fourth, and fifth. But if you can know two areas where he's sleeping, you got a dang good shot of being able to have an encounter.
Now, say that you did find a bed and you found out where he is and where he's sleeping and where he's shaving and shitting and showering and all the other stuff. Now
Right.
you're gonna set up like I'm guessing like on a wind based hunt, right? And as far as the wind based hunt too, if you know where that deer's bed is, are you gonna bed up strictly set up like off of like a scrape, like a rub line? Like, is there any characteristic things other than knowing where that bed is that you're kind of like, I need to be here, right? And then also, do you hunt more or less in the mornings more, or are you more hunting these beds in the evening?
Um. So depends on the time of year, but the biggest feature for me as far as my property and most of the areas that I hunt, it's big elevation changes, so thermals matter a lot. Um, so I always try my best to set up on the upwind, the up thermal side of wherever I think he's going to be traveling. Um, there are some thermal hubs, that's a hot topic now, but there's some bowls that they work in that are great areas to they kind of spider web out of there, the bucks. But I'm always trying to be up thermal side. Wind, um, when thermals are that strong or that much of a factor, wind is swirling all the time. I mean, wind is rarely straight lined where I hunt. I mean, it's rolling around the end of the ridge, or it's I mean, you can throw a piece of milkweed out 1 second and play a game of crossword on your phone, and then it's going the other way when you're done. I mean, it's it's so intermittent and hit and miss that I can't base a sit off of wind alone. So I base sits more on thermals and and temperature changes than I do wind where I'm at. Scrapes are great. Um, I love to sit off of a scrape, maybe 40 to 50 yards off of a scrape where I think the direction I think he's going to be coming from to visit that scrape. But most of the buck beds that I come across are butted up against something really steep or really rocky or impassable. So I refer to them as one direction beds, meaning there's only really one way they can get into those beds because they're not going to jump off a 10-foot cliff face to get down into bed.
Mm.
They're just not going to do it. So if you know where they're bedded and it's a one directional bed, if you can get between where he is all night and his bed in a morning hunt, it's a great spot because you're going to try to get him coming back in there, and you know he's not going to be coming over that cliff face. So if you can find where he is all night, which is usually obtainable by camera data, um, you can pick a spot between there and his bed because he's going to come back there, especially if it's his primary bed.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like you said, if you know where the deer's bedding and he's sleeping, you should probably be able to kill that deer, right? The only
That's right.
mistake is, like you said, I mean, you could be in a thermal hub situation where you think that, hey, the wind or the thermals are usually pulling in this direction, and something changes. It just changes that day, and that is usually where you find all your deer sign, right? Wherever the wind and the thermals are just fucking spinning and rolling around and all that other stuff, and the section that I live in here in Pennsylvania has a lot of way different elevation changes, right? We don't have a lot of like sheer cliffs like this, but we have a lot of mountains, right? They just keep going up and up and up and up. But we also have a bunch of reclaimed coal piles, and there's like all the
Mm-hmm.
coal silt and stuff, and you got old tipples that were built and seams in between these silt mounds and all the other stuff, and it's just it is the hardest. I'm telling you, like if you want to hunt thermals, you have to understand and know what's going on in there. But at the same time, you think you know what you're doing, and then all of a sudden you're in this one spot and you throw your milkweed out, and it's like, huh? Why would it do that? Why would it go there?
Yeah.
Right? The
Yeah.
sun's hitting it or something, and you're thinking, boy, I can even feel an updraft here. And you let it go, and it goes behind your head, and it goes, zoop, and it goes right back down, and you go, well, that's why he's bedding here, right? Now, I can't predict it,
Right.
and he's bedding here because this is almost impenetrable, right? There's just no way to get in here, and sometimes what I've found, the only way that you can get a beat on them or kill them is to hunt the doe bedding that's near where they're bedding because sometimes it just gets stupid. They just start doing stupid
Yeah.
things. And I've had deer chase
Yeah.
does where the doe's looking at me and the buck looks at me and says, buddy, I'm just trying to get some tail here. I don't give a shit that you're there or not, right? And I'm like, well, you should have
That's
cared
right.
because there goes an arrow through your heart, right? But yeah.
Well, and the other thing with thermals too is, and I failed to mention this, but a a cloudy morning, those thermals don't rise near as hard.
Mm,
Like we've all been sitting in the stand shivering and can't wait till that sun hits you in the back of the neck. And when that sun pops up, you can, I mean, when it's super sunny right off the bat and warming up fast, those thermals go up like crazy. So I'm more apt to be aggressive when I know it's going to be a beautiful sunny morning because I know my scent's going up that hill way away from him as opposed to a cloudy morning where it's just kind of going to sit there and kind of swirl around. So that's another factor that I'd like to throw in there with when I'm going to hunt or where I'm going to hunt is it's dependent on what the morning looks like.
yeah. That's why sometimes I think, when you're hunting the leeward side of some types of area, it's it's so hard to set up when you think you know which way they're going to come from because you get in there early in the morning and your thermals are pulling down the hill like you said, and then 9 o'clock rolls around, 8:30, 9 o'clock, whatever time, and that's usually around the time where that sun starts beating on that stuff, and then all of a sudden you feel everything going back up the hill above you, and you're like, well, you know what the hell, the wind was blowing that way, and thermal almost always triumphs wind. I mean, it really does, unless you have a
Yes.
heavy, heavy, heavy wind. But that makes it so hard to sit in one spot all day and hunt all day in one spot because of the way that works. Whereas sometimes I've found where if you're hunting on, um, the north slope, if you will, then for the most part, like this shady spot that you're in is probably always shady. And it's just the
Yeah,
thermal's gonna keep pulling, 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 pulling. And it makes it a little bit easier to set up on them deer. Now, on the flip side of that, what's the vegetation look like on that side of the mountain? Don't get me wrong, there are spots that I hunt. Like, I know at Game Lands, it's polar opposite. The leeward side is not as good hunting as the north side is, for whatever reason or another. And the acorns seem to love to grow on the north side of that mountain. I don't know why. I'm not, I'm not. I don't have education in that stuff, but I can tell you that
right.
it's a different place. Whereas a lot of
Yeah,
people, I would tell a new hunter, they're like, "Hey, where should I go?" I tell them, "Hey, find a leeward side, find some good deer shit, and park your butt in there somewhere because you're going to start seeing some deer." But
yep.
um,
And you asked about whether or not I was a morning guy or an evening guy. 80% of the buck I've killed with a bow has been in the morning.
hmm,
And when I say morning, that's before noon. I've killed a couple buck midday, 1, 2 o'clock, and I think I've killed honestly I think I've killed 2 buck in the evening, and every other buck I've killed with a bow has been in the morning. I like to hunt mornings. I feel like I've got a better shot at it because most of where I hunt is it's better for that thermal rise is much more conducive to hunting the mornings than the evenings. I just feel like I have a better chance in the mornings.
I personally enjoy hunting the mornings. I just wish I didn't have to go to
Yeah,
work in the morning.
that's right.
There's too many mornings that come around, man, and the frost is on the ground, and I open the door to let the dogs out, and I'm thinking, what am I doing? I gotta go to work. I know I need to be in the woods, man. And it's funny, I live in the
Yeah,
woods, so like I'll open the door and I can hear the deer running on the leaves outside of my
yeah,
house, and they're moving, and I'm in there crying, making coffee. I'm boo-hooing because I need to be out there on a scrape. And that's what I
yeah,
like. I like to hunt scrapes if I can. Like I said, I like to position myself to where I can catch a buck moving through an area, kind of winning that scrape or winning a nearby doe bedding. So, um,
yeah.
but yeah, it's an addiction, brother. It's an addiction. I love it. I can't get enough of it. So,
Yeah, it is, and there's so much that goes into it, and every year it changes. Yeah, it's every year you're humbled by something. You're humbled by a bad shot or by a bad setup or being too aggressive or being too passive. I mean, you're you're constantly making mistakes
yeah,
that you hopefully will learn from. So, yeah, I mean, there's that you don't get wisdom without screwing up. I mean, you have to screw up and you have to learn from your mistakes and you have to learn from others'
I
mistakes. So,
agree. I
um,
agree.
like I said, that's why I'm such a big proponent of getting out there and practice killing and practice tracking and practicing doing the whole deal. I mean, it there's not one part of hunting that is less important than another part. It all has to be right, or you're not going to recover the deer.
For
So
sure.
you can be a perfect shot, but if you can't scout, it doesn't matter.
Right. Give me 1 second. I just need to plug a laptop in. Hold on 1 minute.
Yeah,
All right. It was getting mad at me there. He said, I'm losing some juice here. Um,
yeah, they
but
do that.
but you're absolutely right. I also want to put out there that for some reason I have people reach out to me and they feel like there is a scary part of asking for help when it comes to hunting. I don't know like what that is or where that comes from. I mean, people see, like I said before, they see all this stuff on the internet on the television. These guys are doing all this stuff, and they just are like, oh man, like I want to go do that, but I'm kind of just like scared, if you will, or just don't want nothing to do with asking questions about it. And I find it more or less in adults more than children because it's kind of like a pride thing, or like, hey, I don't want to be stupid, right? But
Right.
I like to put that message out there all the time that there is there's just a lot to learn. And even if you start now, you're going to figure out enough going down the road, like by just doing the basic things like going in the woods and finding some deer poop. You find a bunch of deer poop, there's deer there. I can't tell you what deer are
Yes.
there, but they're there. So you find some multiflora rose or maybe some greenbrier, some grapevines, something that you know the deer will hang out in because they're like big bunny rabbits. They will find the thickest stuff that
That's
they
right.
can find, and they live in that area. And especially if it's on edge, just like bunny rabbits do, and they're just a creature of edge. They like to live on edge. What I will say is, you don't need to be the guy that hangs a tree stand right off of the cornfield or the tree stand right off of this field, because I find that a lot of people like to try to do that, but they don't realize that the deer are staging 30 to 40 yards in the woods and they're watching you in your tree stand, right?
Right.
So if you're in these areas where you know the deer are feeding, you need to find where they're staging first because they will do that. Or like you were saying, if you find an area where the deer are feeding, you should probably look for bedding in that area because if there's something thick enough that's impenetrable, you may just stumble upon a buckbred, even if it's really easy access, right? Because how many times have we seen that? They're right here above the parking lot in a little patch of woods that nobody knows of or just looks at and thinks, well, there ain't no deer in there. And that's the 140-inch deer that's watching everybody walk from their trucks into the woods. And that it happens. It does, I know
It
plenty of
does.
guys.
More than you think.
Yeah, it does. And I know plenty of guys that go out pushing deer and finally somebody says, well, don't push that little piece. We never push that. And, somebody's sidewalling it. They're kind of like right on the side of a deer drive and deer, here he comes. Here comes a buck jay hooking around him like he's going to get back in behind him. And wham, you whack him right on the side of a drive. But, um, you know,
And it's funny you say about the rabbit thing too, because my grandfather used to always say that.
mm,
He said, if you know there's rabbits in an area, I guarantee you there's deer
yeah.
there. They love the same stuff. They love the brambles. They love the swampy stuff. And deer and rabbits have very similar habitats, as different as they are.
And they will run circles just like rabbits will.
It's a big circle. I had beagle
Yeah,
dogs for years,
yeah,
and they always came back towards you, but it was always, you knew when they were on a deer circle as opposed to a rabbit
that's
circle.
right.
Big, big difference.
Yeah, I grew up the same way. We had beagles growing up, rabbit hunter. I learned a lot from that. I really did learn a lot from that. I got my own beagle, and God rest her soul, I still feel like to this day I didn't get to run her enough because once that archery bug bit me, and that kind of moves me into the next proponent of what I wanted to go over, and kind of like the last part of our conversation. Pennsylvania has a rich history of a lot of great things, but unfortunately, we have a rich history of things that we need to change. And one proponent that I would like to see change personally is I would like to be able to hunt on a Sunday. I hunt lots of other states where that's legal. I think that helps with the non-resident hunters. And some guys don't want to hear that. Some guys don't want the people to come hunt Pennsylvania, but they're missing the point. There's a lot of money, a lot more money than people understand that comes from the non-resident hunters. That would bring in more non-resident hunters, and then also, that lets me take the kids out on Saturday, or Sunday or whatever, and then Dad gets to hunt on the other day. Things like that, right? I'd even be okay with seeing small game only on Sunday. Anything,
Yeah.
anything, and I think that even the small game on Sunday, I really like that because I feel like small game hunting is a dying thing. Um,
Yeah.
it's definitely not what it used to be. It's still a lot of fun, and I still like, I just took my godson squirrel hunting not too long ago, and he's more than excited to go again. So like, that's just one way. That's how I was taught. My woodsmanship was squirrel hunting, and then rabbit hunting, and then you move into deer hunting and stuff, and it's kind of like a thing you're handed down to. And there are some other things I'd like to see changed or kept the same. You know, I've heard talks of people want to get rid of antler restrictions. I think that antler restrictions are wonderful. I think that they work great for our state. Um, I think that, you know, when Dr. Gary Alt did that, I never don't think I've ever seen my family members so mad about a hunting thing. um, God bless that man because I can't imagine the death threats and the things that come in from him being able to try and do that. I think that he was kind of like their goat. They kind of their sacrilegious goat. They said, "Well, we want to do it, but we're not going to put our name on it." And he said, "Nah, my career is about done anyway. I'll do it." And I think that he did a good thing. They wouldn't have told you that years and years ago, but I will tell you that all my family members are on the same page, and they will tell you that antler restrictions are wonderful. One other thing I would like to
Mhm.
see changed is I do think senior citizens can shoot those deer. If they want to shoot a spike buck, shoot it. Shoot it. I have no problem with
Yeah.
that. I had this conversation with another gentleman, and he said, they don't see as well anymore. There's a couple other things. I said, I'm in. I'm in. 60 plus. If they want them, go ahead and whack them. But what are some things that you think of? And it could be some of my thoughts or any other things. And I want you to hit it on the front side and the back side of that. So I want you to tell me thing or two that you think we do very well, and I want you to tell me a thing or two that you think that you'd like to see changed or looked at.
Yeah. As far as the very well portion of that, I am very much in agreement with you on the antler restrictions. I think that was one of the best things to happen um, in this state. My father has a trunk full of fork horns and spikes that he killed growing up, and you look at that trunk full of skull caps and small antlers, and you think, boy, I wonder what they could have been. And it's a shame to think about that. I mean, hunting was different then,
It
and there
was.
was more deer then,
Oh
and
yeah.
and there was herds of hundreds that you just shot into and hope you got a couple. But so that was different. But this whole antler restriction thing, it was imposed within my life, and it didn't really change much for me. I mean, we weren't. I wasn't really interested in shooting a fork horn after the first buck I ever killed was a spike, and I don't think I've ever killed um, or had a desire to kill another buck that is non-legal now.
Mm,
Growing up, even as a junior hunter, and I think most junior hunters, because of social media and their access to what bucks should could be, I think a lot of younger hunters are interested in killing bigger deer. Um, I don't think there's as much interest in killing those small deer anymore. One, you don't get as much meat off of
yeah,
them
that's a good
for
point.
one thing,
Hmm.
and if you're a meat hunter, I kind of hate that whole "you can't eat the antlers"
I,
saying. I'm not a big fan of that because typically um, a good a nice, high scoring buck is probably a huge deer. So there is more meat to it. So if you're a meat hunter, you probably should be trying to shoot older deer.
yeah.
But yeah, so as far as the good, I'm with you on the antler restrictions. I think that's a great thing. Um, I also am a huge fan of this mentored hunt thing
Mm,
with these young kids getting into it early. I think it's great, not just for the hunting side of it, but teaching the value of life. I think there's so many kids that don't understand how precious life is, and to shoot a deer at 7, 6, 8 years old, I think that exposes a lot of emotions that most kids never get to experience until they're into adolescence. And I think an understanding of that is really important. I grew up with my father on a trap line. We killed stuff in a very intimate way at a very young age. And I was taught the value of life and what it means to kill an animal very early on at a very, intimate distance of a couple feet in a trap. So
yeah.
I think that's really important for kids to be exposed to early and to know that, you know, this is kind of what has to happen in order for everybody to survive. The difference between somebody that doesn't hunt and somebody that the difference between somebody that doesn't hunt and still eats meat and somebody that hunts and eats meat is the person that doesn't hunt is just not man enough to kill their own food. That's the bottom line. somebody's got to kill that for you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not willing to kill it, that's you're putting that responsibility on somebody else, and it's probably in very poor conditions. So I'm a huge proponent of that. As far as the bad in this state, one thing I've been talking about for the last few years, in my opinion, overall, I have a great opinion of the Game Commission. I think they do a great job, especially they have a new fur bear biologist, Tom Keller, who's doing a great job. He's getting a lot of kickback from this pine marten reintroduction, and I think it's unjust. I think people have a false sense of the threat that pine marten's going to pose to wildlife here already. But um, overall, great opinion of the Game Commission. But the one thing I'd like to see changed is the PA elk non-resident tag cost is ridiculous. It is so cheap to be a non-resident and apply for Pennsylvania elk. And while I have no problem with non-residents hunting Pennsylvania elk, I think it should be at the same cost that a Pennsylvania guy like me has to pay to get drawn in New Mexico, which is outrageous.
Mm-hmm.
And the Pennsylvania elk are world class
Yes, they
elk,
are.
and and we're talking about, if it's my understanding, Brian Hale with Elk County Outfitters, I forget, he was on a couple podcasts and he talked about this, but if I remember correctly, it's under like $500 for a non-resident to to uh, to hunt an elk in Pennsylvania if you get drawn. That is dirt cheap for, we're talking about 400-inch bulls. Um, I would also like to see a quota for non-residents in Pennsylvania, because all of our CWD sanctions and you can't do this there and you can't do that. It's all because of that elk herd. It's
Yeah,
that's
you're right.
a herd animal, and we are being, a lot of our rules are being made because they're scared to death that CWD is gonna get in that elk herd, which is their cash cow. Which I am all for them making as much money as possible on the elk because they're there, and I'm all for it. But if we're the ones having to compromise our whitetail hunting because of the elk, I feel like we should be given first crack, so to speak, at these elk tags. And I wouldn't be against, 5 or 10 non-residents getting drawn, but sometimes it seems, I listened to it on the radio this year, the drawing, and it seemed like there was a lot of non-residents getting drawn from all over, and um, I don't know. It just seems a little bit lopsided, and I would at least like to see an attempt to make more money on non-residents, and in addition, less non-residents being drawn at such a, in my view, a lopsided rate.
Yep. I'm on board with it all, man. And it's hard to talk and get into like political things because it's it's an opinion. I have the same opinion you have. I believe the same thing. I believe that the CWD most definitely is for the elk herd. Not a biologist. I just stand behind what I believe. I believe that I've killed more deer than CWD personally.
Yeah,
Uh, Yell at me, say that's not true, whatever. I think that I'm in the same boat as you. I may not have killed more deer than CWD. It's just something I like to say and fire people up. But um,
right.
the CWD thing, elk herd. My gripe with the CWD is here's a road. This side of the road has CWD. This side doesn't. So
Yeah,
um, I understand you have to have barriers, but yeah, I don't know. Touchy thing. If we get a biologist on air or something, he can explain a little bit better. I'd like to have one on each side of the spectrum go at it. I listen to that conversation. I'd like that a lot, but unfortunately, you're probably not going to hear that conversation. Guys are not going to want to.
never.
Right? Yeah, that's not the best conversation. There's
No.
there's definitely a guy that has advantages on one side of the fence than the other, but brother, this has been a wonderful podcast. I really enjoyed you coming on here. Talked about a lot of great things, and I'm super excited for the season, man. I'm ready to rock and roll, and I'm hoping I can check back in with you and just kind of touch on how you killed a large deer this year because That would be what I really want to talk about, and hopefully I can touch on the same thing and say, yeah, I got him. I got him. I made a good shot, and we got him out. I shot him. He went 20 yards, and my brother and I were able to drag him to the truck that was 150 yards away,
Right.
right?
Right.
So,
Right. Yeah, I hope we can swap stories too.
yeah, man. Well, I want to thank you so much for
Yeah.
coming through, man. And before we go, if anybody wants to reach out to you and ask you any questions about the podcast or maybe some tips or tricks on some things that they know that you do and follow you, where can they reach you at?
Yeah, my Instagram is at Steel Parvo. That's the best way to get a hold of me. Other than that, I do have a Facebook, but Instagram's your best bet.
Okay. Okay. Well, brother, thank you so much for coming through, and hopefully we can catch up with you here later in the year or going into next year.
All right, man, that sounds great. Appreciate you having me on.
Thank you, brother. Good blood trails.
Yeah.
Faithful listeners, you have finished another episode of the Keystone Chronicles podcast, guys. I want to thank you so much for tuning into this one. I know a lot of you enjoyed this. That was a great conversation, especially on the tracking part of everything. I want to thank Taylor for coming through. That was really, really a good time, man. And thank you for all the support. I'm going to keep pushing out as much as I can for you guys. And we're going into archery season, and I couldn't be more excited. It's shaping up to be that time of the year, and I feel like I'm coming alive again. And it's just wonderful to be part of this culture and wonderful to be part of you guys' listening experience. So here we go. Thank you, guys.